Hi, in this video I'm going to take you through the workplace reflection framework that you use in your work integrated learning subject. And you're going to use this framework doing reflections on a regular basis through your internship. So here is the workplace reflection framework we're going to use. This is a diagrammatic version of it, and you can see that it's basically a 4-stage cycle. And you're probably looking at this diagram thinking, wow, that's a bit complex. I don't know how I'm going to understand all of this, but don't worry, I'm going to take you through it step by step and explain it to you in detail, and you'll find that it's really not that complex or that difficult to implement. I'll also take you through another document called Key Discussion Points, and that breaks each one of those stages down into some points that you need to discuss in each stage, and I'll take you through all of that in detail. So the first part of the workplace reflective framework is stage 1. And stage 1 is about documenting an experience. And you can see that there are some key things here that you need to discuss. And the experience that you want to be focusing on is one where you kind of go, wow, that was unexpected. I didn't think that was going to happen. Or, geez, that really didn't go to plan. So you want to be focusing on something where the outcome wasn't as good as you'd hoped it was going to be. And if we look in the key discussion points, again, you can see that stage 1 is summarizing an event from which you learnt something, but you don't want to be doing any analysis in this stage. That'll come in stage 2. So you want to briefly describe what the event was. You want to say what your role was during the event. So what were you doing as part of it? What did you expect was going to happen before you went into the event? What was your expectation? And what was the actual outcome from the event? And again, you want to focus on an event or an experience where things didn't go to plan, or where the outcome was unexpected and not as good as you hoped it was going to be. So the next part of the cycle is stage 2, and this is where we're going to analyze that experience to try and work out why the outcome was different to your expectation. And again, you can see that there are some key points highlighted here that you need to discuss. And if we go into the key discussion points document, we can look at those in detail. Now, the first thing I'll say is that some of these dot points have a little special icon beside them, 2 speech bubbles. And what that means is that these are things that you really should discuss with other people before you write your reflection. And the reason for that is that you'll be seeing these things from your own point of view, but there might be other points of view as well. And it's important that when you're thinking through these experiences and reflecting on them to try and extract learning from them, that you're considering as many different points of view as possible, that you're not just seeing things from your own biases or from your own interpretations, but you also understand how other people have seen what's been going on, because that way you'll get a deeper understanding of it and you'll probably learn more from that experience. That also means that you need to do your preparation work before you come to do your reflection. So you need to prepare things ahead of time and have these sorts of discussions with people before you come to write the reflection. So make sure you plan your time properly. The other thing to say is when you are going to discuss these things with other people, you want to be considerate of them while you're having that discussion. So you definitely don't want to be accusatory, or you don't want to imply that other people have done something wrong, particularly if these are people who were involved in the incident as well. You just want to have a polite conversation with them from the point of view of you're an intern who's having new experiences and you're trying to understand them better and learn from them, and you'd appreciate their help to try and think things through. So stage 2 is about analysing the event to work out why the outcome was different to your expectation. And the kind of things you need to talk about are what actions or decisions of yours might have affected that outcome? And what actions and decisions of the people around you who were involved might have affected the outcome? And the next thing you want to talk about is what were your emotions or feelings during the experience? Were you angry? Were you frustrated? Were you embarrassed? Were you happy and excited? So you would have had a range of emotions while you were going through this experience. Now your first reaction might be, hang on a second, I'm doing an engineering degree here. Why do I need to focus on all this fluffy stuff about emotions and feelings? What's that got to do with anything? Well, in fact, it's actually really quite important because it's all to do with your emotional intelligence. Okay, so people who are aware of and in control of their emotions while they're going through experiences and don't let their emotions get the better of them tend to handle situations better. And there's also a body of research that shows that they're more employable overall. So building up your emotional intelligence and understanding how your emotions might be affecting you is actually quite an important thing for an engineer to be able to do. So again, you want to think through your emotions while you were going through the event and think about, did this affect your actions and decisions in some way? And if so, how did it affect your actions and decisions? The next thing you want to talk about is, were there any external factors or influences that might have come into play? And these could be material, environmental, situational things, non-human factors. That could be things like a hardware failure or a software failure, might be a weather event, it could be a traffic jam, any sort of non-human factor that might have come into play that influenced the outcome in some way. So by way of example, let's say you had a presentation that you needed to do and you prepared all your slides and you uploaded them to something like Google Dropbox in the cloud. But then when you come to do your presentation, the internet is down and you can't access your slides. Or another example might be, let's say you have a meeting out on site, but when you're traveling out there, there's a bad traffic jam and it means you get to site late. So that's an example of the kind of non-human or external factor that might come into play, affecting an outcome that perhaps you should have planned for. The next thing you want to talk about is, what were your emotions and feelings about that experience now that you've had a bit of time to think about it in hindsight? And how might this affect the way you approach this type of situation in future? So if you're particularly embarrassed or frustrated or angry about an experience in hindsight, that might have a bearing on your willingness to handle the situation in future or the way you go about approaching that in future. So again, raising your emotional intelligence and understanding how your emotions and feelings might be impacting you in this way is an important thing to do. Now you notice that we haven't really asked you to discuss your emotions and feelings with other people. That's a private thing for you to come to terms with. If you do want to discuss it with other people, you can, but essentially these are private things that you can think of for yourself and write about for yourself. Now, the last thing that you want to think about in stage 2 is, how do you think you performed given the circumstances? So given your level of responsibility and your stage of development as an intern and what the situation was that was going on, do you think you handled yourself quite well? Even if the whole situation was a complete disaster, you actually acquitted yourself quite well? Or do you think that, well, really, you could have performed better in the circumstances? Now, you might be finding it kind of difficult to think, well, what are the sorts of emotions I should be talking about here? I'm not really familiar with doing this kind of thing. And so there are lots of resources out there that you could look at to help you with that. One of them is Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, but there's plenty of other resources as well. So if you're finding it difficult to think through what your emotions might be or to articulate those, you can do a little bit of research online and try and find out some information about emotions and feelings and how they might be impacting you, and that should be able to help you out. So far we've talked about stage 1 and stage 2 in the cycle. And if you think about it, here we've been talking about a specific experience that you've had, and we've documented what that experience is, and we've analysed that experience, or we've reflected on it. And what we'll do now is talk about stages 3 and 4. And stages 3 and 4 are about taking what you've learnt from a specific experience and trying to generalise that out so that you can apply it more broadly and plan to improve generally. So first we'll talk about stage 3. And stage 3 is about identifying a key thing that you've learnt and then trying to work out how you might apply that more broadly. Again, you can see that there are some key things that you need to talk about, which are highlighted here. And if we move on to the key discussion points document, we can see those in more detail. So you want to focus on one key thing that you learnt from the experience and think about its broader application. So this is really important. You need to focus on just one key thing that you've learnt from the experience and clearly say what it is. Could be that you learnt many different things from an experience, but we want you to focus in on just one key thing. So let's say you're working in a team, and in the morning your boss says, okay everyone, there's a major thing that's popped up. We need to get this done. It's a matter of urgency. We absolutely have to get this thing done by the end of the day. Divide the work up amongst yourselves, get it done, make sure it's done by the end of the day. So as a team, you discuss the task and you divide up the work amongst you, and you all set about doing what it is that you need to do. And lunchtime comes along and one of your colleagues says, I'm just going to go and grab lunch for half an hour, I'll be back. And a couple of hours later, this person cruises into the office, and by this stage you're really upset and annoyed, and you have a major confrontation with them. There's a big argument in the office, some relationships are damaged, and it's really not a good look at all. So from that kind of experience, you might learn a number of things. You might say, well, I need to handle stress more effectively. Or you might think, geez, I should have been more assertive and shown a bit of initiative. I should have contacted that person and got them back into the office. Or perhaps you should have been a bit more assertive with your boss and gone to see them and say, hey, we're not going to get this thing done if this person doesn't come back to the office. So is there something else I should get on with instead? Or can you take some action here? Or maybe you'll learn that, well, you should have shown a bit of initiative and reprioritise your tasks. So while that person wasn't in the office, you could have gone on and got on with some other things so you weren't completely wasting your time. So there's quite a lot of things that you could have learnt from that. It could also be that as you think back on this experience in hindsight, you're kind of thinking, wow, that was a bit embarrassing. I really didn't handle that conflict very well. And you kind of think, well, I should learn to manage conflict more effectively. So again, there's a range of things that you could have learnt from that particular event, but what you want to do is focus in just on one main thing, one key thing that you've learnt from that experience that you want to deal with through the remainder of this reflective process. Could be that you would actually like to explore a number of different things, in which case you would write separate reflections on each one. But in any one reflection you do, just focus in on one key thing that you've learnt, clearly say what it is, and develop that through the rest of the reflection. So the next thing you're going to do in stage 3 is to try and recognize that this key thing that you've learnt in that specific situation has some broader application. Okay, so you're going to do that by thinking up at least 2 clear and specific examples, reasonably detailed examples of future professional engineering situations where what you've learnt in that specific situation might be applied going forwards. And you want to make sure that the examples you think of are different to this original event that you're reflecting on, and they're also different to each other. So you want to think as broadly as you can, try and think of as wide-ranging situations as you can, so you get as broad an understanding as possible of where else you might be able to apply this thing that you've learnt in future. Now again, you'll notice that this is something where you should probably discuss this with other people. You're an intern, you may not really be able to think of that many other situations where you might be able to apply this going forward. So go and pick the brains of other people and go and talk to them about where else in their careers and in their work they have applied this type of skill. And that can help you learn from them about how you can translate what you've experienced in this specific situation out into general engineering practice. So now we come to the final stage of the cycle, which is stage 4, and this is about planning to improve your performance going forward. Again, you can see that there are some key things that you need to talk about, and if we go and look at the key discussion points document, we can see those in detail. So in stage 4, you're going to research a tool or method that can help you improve, and you're going to plan how you're going to apply that tool or method going forwards. So the first thing you're going to do is some basic research into a method or a tool that can help you improve performance. And this is something where you need to go and discuss this with other people or get some external input. So you need to research a new tool or method, something you don't already know. And you're going to find this through a bit of research, which might be discussing things with an experienced colleague or mentor to find out how they handle this type of situation. It might be reading a journal or a textbook of some sort, or it might be doing some online research making sure that you're using a reasonably authoritative website. Okay, and you want to briefly document the method or the tool that you've found. And you also want to cite the source that you used in your research. So you want to say where you found this tool or method. So the next thing you're going to do is discuss your plan for implementing that tool or method going forward. You want to concisely state how your behavior or your approach will change in future to improve your performance based on the application of the tool or method that you've found from your research. So what's your plan for applying that tool or method going forward? The last thing you want to do is think a little bit about, is this plan something that suits you personally? Is it a tool or a method and a plan that you're likely to want to use going forwards? It's not much good researching something and planning how you're going to use it if it's really not something that you think suits you. So make sure that as you're developing your plan and finding your tools and methods, it's something you're likely to want to use going forwards in your career. Okay, so that is basically the 4 stages of the cycle: documenting an experience, analyzing that experience to understand why the outcome was different to your expectation, focusing on one key thing that you've learnt from that specific situation and recognizing that it has broader application in your engineering practice, and then finding a tool or method to help you improve and planning how you're going to implement that going forwards.